Rev up your engines! Okay, today we got an interesting one. It's a Saturn Aura. You may or may not have heard about it. They only made them for a few years, but this guy likes Saturns. He buys them used, cheap, few $1,000 here and there, and he just drives them till the wheels fall off. He's like me. Now, the Aura was an interesting car because it was the last cars that Saturn made, and in reality, this thing is more akin to a Chevy Impala or a Malibu because it's basically a GM car. Hey, the strut still works, didn't fall down. You can see it's a 3.5 liter GM V6 engine. Now, as a brand itself, Saturn had all kinds of problems because GM created Saturn, but then the Saturn got a better image and the GM executives got kind of mad and they were moving some of their labor around, taking the workers from Tennessee in a Saturn, put them in a GM place, moving irate GM workers to Tennessee to work in a Saturn plant, and they had that big hassle that originally they had beautiful Honda V6 engines, but being GM, they had a big argument with Honda. Honda said you can only put our Honda coolant in our Honda V6 engines, and GM says every engine and every car that we make has to take our Dex Cool, which was one of the worst coolants in the world back in the day. It's okay now, they changed the reformulation, but back in the day it was clogging up engines. So Honda said, we won't give any more engines. And that was kind of the beginning of the decline of Saturn. They started putting GM engines in that were nowhere near as reputable as the Honda V6 engines were. So it just started going down. And this particular model, Aura, to me it really made no sense because the last year that they made these, they sold like 30,000 or 40,000 of these, right? Where Toyota sold hundreds of thousands of Camrys, yet the Camrys were $500 cheaper than these if you look at the base models. So it kind of didn't make much sense. This thing competing with Camrys that can go 400,000 or 500,000 miles, and the Camrys cost less. So needless to say, they only made these for a few years, and then away they went. But guys like the owner of this car, he just bought it a few months ago, you can get them cheap and they still have a lot of mileage left in them. They weren't horrible cars, they were bad price, but I mean, for what he paid, it wasn't a bad price. When they were new, yeah, they were overpriced for what you got, and especially in those days, in the mid-2000s, Toyota was just taking over. The Camry has been the best-selling car in the United States. Then it went for 20-something years, and this was competing against it, so there really wasn't much chance of ever making it in the mass market. Maybe it's appealed to a certain amount of small people, but the mass majority of people were buying Toyota Camrys or Honda Accords, which were number 2, and that kind of just pushed this thing out of the way. Front-wheel drive cars, they handle good in the snow, and interesting enough, you can see Saturn's original whole thing was, well, we got plastic cars. Bumpers, doors are plastic. Hey, they're not going to rust, right? Well, that ain't plastic, that's metal, right? Because this is a GM car. It's really not a Saturn. Just like the later SUVs that they sold as Saturns, they were just rebadged GM trucks. They just kept the name. They were Saturns in name only. Normally, I tell people, well, they don't make a car anymore. It's kind of stupid to buy one. Where are you going to get parts from? But, I mean, it's just a Malibu or an Impala with a generic 3.5 liter V6, brakes and everything. You go to any auto parts store and still get parts for these things, and half of that is because they really aren't Saturns, they're GM, so there's a lot more compatibility with other GM cars, and getting parts for these things isn't that bad. You can get them relatively cheaply. We're going to check this one out with a giant scan tool because he wants to see if it's going to have any problems, if there's anything going on that he has to worry about. We'll do a standalone diagnosis. You can do a topology scan, so where we go while it's doing it, we'll look. They weren't bad designed cars, black and chrome steering wheel, comfy seats. The seats have held up pretty well. They're not all ripped and torn. Reasonable amount in the back seats. It's fancy one, so it's got a sunroof on it. That's a nice looking car still. 100% scan. There's only one trouble code, so that's not bad at all. We'll see what's going on with the airbag system. They often don't work. Present system invalid serial data. So I guess you gotta worry that the passenger airbag's not gonna work, but hey, the seat belt still works. So we'll start her up. Live data. Show black is good, red is bad. Start looking through some of the stuff. The map sensor's normal. The injectors are normal. And as we can see, short-term fuel term 0. Sometimes a -2.0. Pretty close to 0. Not bad. Considering it's got like 120,000 miles on it. We'll go further down the line. Fine there. So let's go backwards in time here. And we'll look at the transmission data. A little touchy this morning. There we go. Check out the transmission data. Sometimes these trannies will wear out. The V6 engine puts out a lot of horsepower. A lot of times they'll have transmission problems. This has no codes, but we'll look at the data and see if anything is off kilter. Everything looks good so far. Yeah, the tranny seems in good shape. Now the idle's nice and smooth. We'll go slow over the bump because this isn't a particularly high car. Here we go. Now you can hear the power steering pump. It whines a little, but hey, it's an older car. What do you expect? The airbag light is on because the passenger airbag doesn't work anymore, but he knows that. Get out to the big road here. Give it a little bit of gas in a second. When the lawnmower dude gets out of the way. Here we go. Decent acceleration. Trendy still shifts good. Really? For the few thousand he paid for it? A decent car. Mind you, it doesn't compare to a Toyota Camry. Hey, you're not going to get a Toyota Camry for, $3,000, are you? Still handles decent. Makes a few noises here and there from the rubber bushings being a little older because it is a Massachusetts car. And you're going to get rust and corrosion here and there. But really, all in all, it's a decent car. We'll check the tranny again. Nice smooth shift. Didn't feel weird. You can barely feel it shift. It's really a decent car, but the company went out of business for all the problems that GM had with running Saturn and kind of destroyed the company. They created it and kind of pretended that it was its own company, but of course it wasn't because GM owned them. And then, when they tried to compete with the Toyota Camry with a car like this, kind of showed that their administrators, their upper level guys, really didn't know what the heck they were doing. But really, what he paid for it, $3,000, what the heck? He's owned a few of them, when something big goes wrong, he's not dumb. Transmissions and these things cost a fortune to replace. If it ever went bad, he'd just junk it, look for another car. So there you have it, a Saturn Aura. You may have never heard of it. Kind of a strange name for a car. Talking out their own cars, calling them Saturns. They knew, obviously, they were going to shut the company down. And they just pretty much rebadged Malibus and Impalas, sold them as Saturns, and they can be decent cars for a cheap enough price. Hey, an average car this day is like $6,000 a year to buy and maintain. Okay, so if he gets 6 months out of this thing, and I'm sure he's going to get a lot more than that out, you make out like a gangbusters. Plus, if you think about it, the insurance on these older cars is much cheaper, especially if you're a young person, that you're going to save a bunch of money not just buying it, but insuring it when you need to do that. So, hey, not a bad car. It really isn't a Saturn, and Saturn didn't exist when they stopped making these models. They couldn't compete with the Toyota Camry or the Honda Accord, but hey, they could still be a decent knock-around car if you're looking for one. And here's some bonus questions and answers. Anthony Tanio says, I bought a 50-year-old Mercedes, dirt cheap, set for 5 or 6 years, 4-speed manual. But it has 2 issues. The fuel gauge works until it gets halfway, then it drops to the bottom and says I'm out of gas. And the second issue is when I step on the gas, I have to go about halfway until the engine starts revving up. I would not buy a 50-year-old Mercedes. I don't care what the price is. It's sat for 5 or 6 years, maybe even more. Who knows? Your gas gauge is a relatively simple problem. The sending unit in the gas tank is breaking. It goes up and down, and on the backside is variable resistance, and yours works at the top, but when it gets halfway, it shorts out. So you got to replace that if you want to do that, okay? But not accelerate until you really give it a bunch of gas. That thing sat all those years. You're going to probably have to drop the gas tank, have it steam cleaned. It's probably full of sludge. Gasoline turns into sludge over all those years, right? The filter's going to have to be replaced. Probably the pump. It's probably made the pump get weak, and it's not working correctly, right? But if you want to try a cheap fix, maybe it'll work. It's worth trying. My friend Bernie in Albuquerque has the ATS fuel cleaner. Buy a can of it, put it in the tank, start it up, let it idle for half an hour, try to drive it around, and maybe that cleaner will get the sludge out. I've seen it work. ATS cleaner. Just Google Bernie Albuquerque ATS. You can buy it. Put it in the gas tank, pray it cleans all that crap out. It's good stuff. If it doesn't, you have to start taking everything apart, cleaning it all. Mercedes-Benz parts cost a fortune. I would never buy a Mercedes that's 50 years old that's sat for 5 to 6 years or more. Now, if somebody had been driving it the whole time and you got it dirt cheap, hey, at least it ran, you could see, but hey, could be a rat's nest about. Pray the cleaner fixes it. The running, try the cleaner first and pray. You don't have to take everything apart. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.